2008, I think there's a really good evidence for why people would be so interested in the campaign. Is that, say what you wrote about Obama's politics, but definitely young people getting engaged in that process and saying we want to really make a change. That was what made that election. Whatever has happened since has happened since, and people have drawn very different conclusions about that. But I think the thing to take away is that we are a very potent force. Young people who stand up and say, I want to fight for the future that we're going to inherit, that's a really potent thing and something that really can make a lot of fascinating, interesting, and dynamic things happen and change. And so I'm very encouraged that all of you, despite all the inaction, all the negativity surrounding different issues relating to environmental justice and climate change, and dirty energy versus clean energy, the fact that everyone here decided to take their Saturday and take their day to come here and say, you know what, as frustrating as it is sometimes to work on these things, I still want to be a part of it. That's really inspiring, so I want to thank all of you for that. I look forward to spending today with you, and from there I'd like to give it back over to Betta, who will be the first panel. So thank you for coming.
Pumped deep underground to break up trapped pockets of gas, water that can actually be lit on fire. When you see the images of the water being lit on fire, you know that there is something wrong with this process. Some of the things that we'll talk about in the workshop later are some of the other issues that sometimes get overlooked, like millions of gallons of toxic waste that ends up in our drinking water. There's no good way of disposing of it. Or the fact that there's actually radioactive material deep underground. So you're actually bringing radioactive material up to the surface. They want to do this all across the entire state of New York, particularly in the areas where New York City, where we get our drinking water. And what I think it's sort of interesting. I feel like everyone who's involved in this movement has a story of how they found out about it, because once you hear about fracking, you tend to be so horrified. And I know, at least for us, as soon as we found out about it, we just couldn't really work on anything else and couldn't think about anything else about except how to stop this from actually starting in the area that we live and where everyone we know lives, and we were so horrified that people didn't know about it. And what we found in working on this is that as horrible as fracking is, and as obvious and as much of a no-brainer as you would think this issue is, this movement actually really needs all of us, because this is going to happen immediately unless we all get involved.
Woo! Hey, Buck. So my name's Julia, and about a year ago, Shannon and I and a couple of students formed this whole network. And it was around that time I started to learn about hydrofracking. We actually had a workshop at the last summit about it, and it was kind of crazy to think about, like that this gas drilling for this natural gas way underground, exploding rock, contaminating potentially the whole watershed of New York City could even happen. And so, like many of you probably in hearing that, it's like, no, there's no way that these giant corporations like Halliburton would be able to roll up into the New York City reservoir system and contaminate this water system that's like so precious to 9 million people. But as I started to learn more and more, I realized, oh shit, that's gonna happen, like that's about to happen, and we need to stop it. And so I just started to find out, like, who's working on this? What are these different environmental organizations? How can I get involved? How can we, like, raise the level of consciousness in New York City so much? Because, I mean, if everybody in the city knew that their water was about to be destroyed, like, this would be a huge issue that you would hear about, like, on every nightly news show. Like, and why aren't we hearing about it? And, like, who's working on this? So about a year ago, last spring, I saw a friend of mine, and I was still under this impression, like, even though I knew it was really bad, it was like, different people are working on this. There's no way the politicians would let this happen, and all that. And I saw my friend who works for the congressman up in my area, Congressman Hinchy, who's like the main federal, representative who's been fighting this. And he said, Julia, if there's no moratorium in place, they're going to start drilling by the fall, by like a couple of months ago. And I said, oh my God, I have to drop everything I'm doing and figure out how are we going to stop this thing. And just around that time, our New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, which is like the environmental organization for the state, had made this statement of we're going to release these regulations by the fall. And so we had kind of that information to say to people like, look, the DEC is already saying that they're going to do this. Like, we have to stop this. It was around the same time that the Gulf disaster was like in full throttle. And there was this really major connection that could be made between what was happening in the Gulf and what was about to happen here. But the chance that we had here was we could stop it. And so I figured out, oh my God, there's not so many organizations working on this, but I heard about this little gathering up in Ithaca of different environmental activists who were really like ready to get arrested. So I thought, well, hey, if they're ready to get arrested, then maybe they'll be down to like try to push for this legislation, because we got a couple of weeks left to do this and get this moratorium passed, which will put a stop to it in New York State and give us the time to build up the consciousness in New York City and all across the state to say, hell no, we don't want this. Like, this is crazy,
The moratorium really made a huge impact, not just in the country, but around the world, because this is the first time that a major government body took this issue seriously and said, this is enough of a concern that we are going to declare an official timeout on it. New York State is setting the standard for this issue across the entire country. What we do here is creating that high standard for the rest of the country and for the world, because this is...
But no pressure, guys.